It was a Tuesday night like any other. Or at least it was supposed to be. My wife, Ashley, had been acting strange for weeks now. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Little things like how she'd get quiet when I came into her room, or how she'd always be texting or talking on the phone when I wasn't around. I'd let it slide, chalking it up to stress from her job or whatever nonsense she was telling me at the time. But then, that night, I heard something that shattered everything. I had been sitting on the couch, flipping through some random show on TV, when I heard her voice from the bedroom. It was muffled at first, but it wasn't hard to recognize the tone. She was on the phone, and something about her voice made me uneasy. I wasn't the type of guy to spy, never had been. But something gnawed at me. My gut told me something wasn't right. So I stood up, slowly, and crept toward the bedroom door. I wasn't sure what I expected to hear, but I had to know. I pressed my ear against the door, my pulse racing. Took a moment for the words to sink in, but when they did, they hit like a ton of bricks. "Honey, I've been having problems since we last met. I think one of your buddies gave me something," she said, her voice low but clear. My heart stopped. She paused for a second, as if the words were still sinking in for her, then continued. "Deal with it quickly. I can't avoid intimacy with my cuckold forever, or he'll suspect something, and he'll just kill us both." Kill? The words cut through me like a knife. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that she was speaking like that or the fact that I was the cuckold she was talking about. Every ounce of my trust in her crumbled right then and there. I barely breathed, my mind reeling. I was in a state of shock, unable to move for a few seconds, but then everything hit me in a rush. The cheating, the lies, the absolute disrespect. I had been living with a woman who not only had no regard for me, but was planning to get rid of me. Was I even her husband anymore? Or was I just the poor fool who didn't know what she was doing behind my back? I stood there, frozen, as Ashley continued to talk. "Please, I can't take it anymore. Just make sure we're safe from him. We can't risk him finding out. Do it tonight or we're both dead." Dead. My mind was on fire. Who was she talking to? What had she done? Who was she planning to kill me for? Was she really so heartless that she would plan my death just to protect whatever twisted affair she had going on? And then, just as suddenly as it started, the conversation stopped. I heard the click of the phone ending, and everything fell into a chilling silence. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer, not after hearing all of that. But I was too stunned to leave right away. I took a few steps back, my chest tightening. The betrayal hit me in waves. This wasn't just a casual fling. This was something deeper, darker, more dangerous. I had to confront her. There was no way I could let this go. But what the hell was I supposed to say? How do you even process something like this? I didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this go without a fight. And when I finally did face her, when I finally confronted Ashley, I had no idea how far things would go. But the thought of her, of everything she'd done to me, made something snap inside me. This wasn't just about me catching her in a lie anymore. It was about me reclaiming control, taking back my dignity. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. What followed would be far more than I ever imagined. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to control the rage and the confusion that were bubbling inside me. It wasn't just that she'd betrayed me. It wasn't even the fact that she was planning to get rid of me. No, it was the way she spoke so coldly, so calculated, as if I didn't matter at all, as if I was nothing more than an obstacle, an inconvenience, that, more than anything, felt like a slap in the face. But I had to be smart. I couldn't just storm in there and demand answers like a lunatic. I knew Ashley. I knew her manipulation. She was a master at twisting things to make me look crazy, to make me doubt myself. But tonight, I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. I left the hallway and went back to the living room, trying to steady my breath. I could feel the weight of my own thoughts, like they were dragging me down. Every minute that passed only made it worse, but I couldn't rush this. I needed to know everything, all of it. So I waited. After what felt like hours, she finally emerged from the bedroom, looking completely unaware that her whole world was about to come crashing down. Her eyes met mine, and she smiled, but there was something off about it. It didn't reach her eyes. It was forced. "Hey babe, everything okay?" she asked, trying to sound casual, like nothing had changed. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, trying to piece together the puzzle. I could feel the heat building inside me, but I didn't let it show. "Not yet." "Who were you talking to on the phone?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Her face went pale, but she quickly recovered, forcing a laugh. "What? Oh, just some work stuff. You know how it is." T. I could see right through her lies. "Cut the crap, Ashley," I snapped, my patience running thin. "I heard everything. I know what you've been doing, and I know who you've been doing it with." Her eyes widened, but she quickly masked it with feigned innocence. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling just slightly. I leaned in, getting closer, my voice low but full of venom. "Don't act like I'm stupid. You're not fooling anyone. I know about him, the guy you've been seeing behind my back. And I know you're planning something. Something that involves me not being around anymore." Her expression shifted then, just a flicker, like a switch had been flipped. I could see the coldness in her eyes. The mask had slipped. "You don't know anything," she said sharply, her voice suddenly turning venomous. "You've always been so paranoid, so insecure. It's pathetic. Do you really think I'd let some random guy mess up my life over you? You're nothing. Nothing." The words hit harder than I thought they would. But I wasn't going to let her break me. Not this time. I straightened up, trying to keep my composure. "You're right about one thing. I was insecure. I let you walk all over me. I let you treat me like I was nothing. But not anymore. Not now." I could see the shock on her face, but it quickly morphed into rage. "How dare you?" she shouted. "You have no idea what I've been through. You think you can just waltz in here and accuse me of something without even knowing the truth? You're pathetic. And you'll never find someone who can tolerate you the way I do. You're lucky I stayed with you for this long." The venom in her voice was palpable. She was a completely different person now. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. This woman was a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who didn't give a damn about me. "You're right," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm lucky. Lucky to be rid of you. You've shown me exactly who you are. And frankly, it's not someone I want to spend another minute with." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, it felt like everything had frozen. But then, her eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward, like she was going to physically strike me. But I didn't flinch. "You think you can just walk away from this?" she hissed. "You think you can walk away from me? You won't get away with this. You'll regret it. I swear to God, you'll regret this." Her threats were empty, but the coldness in her voice made them sound more real than they were. I stood my ground. "You're the one who should regret it, Ashley. You've already thrown everything away. And now it's my turn to walk away." I could see the panic start to settle in her eyes, but there was still a part of her that was trying to maintain control, trying to act like she was the one in power. But she wasn't anymore. I turned and walked toward the door, not bothering to look back. I had never felt such a weight lift off my shoulders as I did in that moment. It wasn't just that I was leaving her. It was that I was finally taking control of my life. The betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow, but it had taught me something I needed to learn. Ashley wasn't the woman I thought she was. She was never going to change. And that, more than anything, was the hardest thing to accept. But as I walked out the door, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the same man who had walked in hours before. I was someone stronger, someone smarter, someone who knew better than to let someone like her destroy him. I had learned the hard way, but I had learned, and that was enough. I slammed the door behind me, the echo of it reverberating in my mind, like it was sealing off a chapter of my life that I couldn't burn fast enough. My hand still trembled as I fumbled with my keys, the cold metal biting into my skin, but the adrenaline kept me sharp. I had to move. I had to get out of there before she came after me with more lies. But she didn't follow. Not yet. Maybe she didn't have the guts to come after me. Or maybe she didn't care enough anymore. Either way, I was done. I stepped out into the night, the chill air biting at my skin, grounding me in a reality I didn't want to face but knew was necessary. Everything had changed. The man I had been just hours ago was a stranger to me now. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, this emptiness that hadn't been there before. And yet, there was something else, something far stronger. A fire, a newfound clarity, a sense of power that had been stolen from me for so long. But now it was mine. I walked. I didn't know where, didn't care. The streets were empty, the city quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I felt like I was on the edge of something, a precipice I didn't know existed until I stood on it. I didn't even realize I'd been walking for an hour until I stopped. I was near a park, the swings swaying in the breeze, the stillness of it all almost suffocating. It was then I realized the truth, the depth of the betrayal. Ashley hadn't just taken something from me. She had stolen my peace, my trust, my belief in the good in people, in her. She had turned me into something I hated, someone who questioned everything, doubted everything. I had let it happen, had swallowed her lies for so long that now, when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the man who stared back at me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was lost. I was shattered. And the pieces scattered around me weren't going to come back together neatly. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. It was Ashley. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the green button. It would be so easy to pick up, to listen to whatever pathetic excuse she had ready. But I couldn't. I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. The phone buzzed again, and then a third time. Each buzz sent a jolt through my chest. Couldn't breathe. Finally, I let it go to voicemail. I sat down on one of the cold benches, my hands gripped tight around my phone, almost as if it were a lifeline to a life I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore. The next few minutes felt like hours, but then came the text. Short, to the point. We need to talk. I made a mistake. Please, don't do this. Her words were a desperate plea, but they didn't land the way she wanted them to. They didn't make me feel the way she thought they would. There was no remorse, no guilt, just a calculated attempt to reel me back in, to make me feel responsible for her actions. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep being the one who bent, who tried to fix what wasn't broken in the first place. She was broken, not me, so I deleted the message. I turned the phone off, slipping it back into my pocket, the weight of it pressing against my chest like an anchor, dragging me down into the depths of uncertainty. What came next? Where did I go from here? I didn't know. But for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her dictate my next move. I stood up, brushing the cold from my pants, the night sky above me dark and endless. There was no going back. I couldn't go back to that house, to her lies. Not after hearing her plan to have me erased from her life as if I were nothing. I began to walk again, this time with purpose. My phone stayed off. I didn't need it. I didn't need anyone to tell me how to feel or what to do. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. The streetlights blurred past me as I moved, my steps quickening. A part of me knew I should feel sorrow, grief even. But what I felt was something else. Something more raw, more primal. It was freedom. It was anger. It was the kind of clarity that only comes after the fog of denial has burned away. I couldn't help but think of all the lies she had told me. The way she'd gaslight me into thinking I was crazy for even questioning her. And all the times I'd swallowed it, hoping she'd change, hoping she'd come back to me. But now I saw it clearly. Ashley wasn't going to change. She wasn't capable of change. I had to face that. The night stretched on, and I finally found myself standing at the edge of the city, the familiar skyline of lights and chaos now a distant memory. A momentary thought crossed my mind. Could I go back to the life I had before her? Could I rebuild? But then I realized something. I wasn't going to rebuild. I wasn't going to go back. I was going to start over. A new life. A life where I didn't have to wonder if the woman I loved was out there plotting my demise, or worse, playing me for a fool. A life where I was enough. I let out a breath, my chest loosening with the realization that I could do this. I could let go. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't scared. Because this time I was free. I kept walking. No destination in mind, just a desire to keep moving, to put as much distance between myself and the wreckage of my life as possible. The city was still buzzing around me, a blur of lights and noise, but none of it mattered. It was all background noise to the storm churning inside my chest. I didn't know what I was looking for, but it didn't matter. I needed to feel something, anything other than the weight of betrayal that still clung to my skin like a second layer. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't even check who it was. I was too exhausted to care. But I knew it was her. That fact gnawed at me, gnawed at my sense of control, but I couldn't give in to it. I wouldn't. It wasn't until I found myself standing on the pier by the river, staring out at the dark water, that I stopped. I wasn't sure how long I had been walking. An hour? 2? But the steady motion had given me something I hadn't had all night. Clarity. The cold breeze kissed my face, and for a fleeting moment, I felt alive again. It was the first time all evening that I felt something other than numbness. But the pain still lurked beneath the surface, waiting to pull me under. I leaned against the railing, gripping it tightly, the roughness of it grounding me as my thoughts tumbled in every direction. I thought of the lies, the little things she had done to manipulate me over the years. The way she had smiled when she was lying, the way her voice would shift when she was hiding something from me. It was all so obvious now, but I couldn't see it at the time. And the worst part was, I had let it happen. I had been a willing participant in my own degradation, in my own manipulation. Why did you do it? I whispered to the empty night air, but I already knew the answer. She hadn't done it because of me. She hadn't done it because of anything I had done or hadn't done. She had done it because she could. Because it was easy. Because, in her mind, she had always been in control and I had allowed her to believe that. The anger that had been simmering under the surface erupted in a flash. I slammed my fist against the railing. "You bastard," I muttered to the night. "You lied to me. You ruined me." But she wasn't the one to blame. No, she wasn't the one who had allowed all of this to happen. I had stayed silent for too long, ignored the signs, convinced myself that I was the problem when it was her all along. She was the one who was broken, not me. I closed my eyes, trying to push the flood of emotions back. I wasn't going to let her win. Not now. Not when I was so close to breaking free of the chains she had wrapped around me for so long. The truth hit me like a freight train. So simple, yet so powerful. I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. I opened my eyes, feeling the weight of that truth settle into my bones. I wasn't going to keep dragging myself through this. I wasn't going to keep chasing her forgiveness. I wasn't going to beg for answers or waste another minute wondering why. I had to walk away. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. It didn't make the pain go away, but it made it easier to breathe. I looked down at the water below, the dark surface reflecting the moonlight. The silence around me was deafening, but somehow peaceful. I could feel the shift inside me. The old me, the man who had been swallowed up by Ashley's lies and manipulation, was gone. The man standing here now, alone on this pier, was someone different. Someone stronger. Someone who had learned that survival didn't mean staying in a toxic relationship or holding on to a dead end. It meant moving forward. No matter how painful, no matter how uncertain the future seemed. It meant choosing to be free. I could hear my phone buzzing again. The vibration in my pocket was a sharp reminder that she hadn't given up. She wouldn't give up easily. But it didn't matter. She could call. She could text. She could even show up on my doorstep tomorrow, begging for another chance. It wouldn't change anything. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen. Another message. Another lie. I didn't even bother reading it. My thumb hovered over the screen, the weight of the decision pressing on me. Then, without hesitation, I hit block. I felt nothing. No guilt. No hesitation. It was the final act in my liberation from her grasp. I didn't need her to validate me. I didn't need her apologies. I didn't need to fix what was already broken. I wasn't going back. There was no turning back. And for the first time, I felt a weight lift off me that I hadn't even known existed. I walked away from the pier, my feet crunching the gravel as I moved toward the streetlights. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I wasn't lost. Not anymore. The world seemed vast, stretching out before me like an open road, one that I hadn't seen clearly until now. I had spent so long thinking that my happiness was tied to Ashley, to her approval, to her love. But now I knew that my happiness had to come from within. I had to rebuild it myself. I had to start from scratch, and maybe it would hurt like hell along the way, but that was okay, because I knew now that I could handle it. I could handle whatever came next. I didn't need her. I didn't need anyone who didn't value me. I could feel the strength in my chest, the beat of my heart steady, no longer racing with anxiety or fear. The man I was now was someone who knew his worth. Someone who could stand tall, alone, without the crutch of someone else's lies. I smiled, just a little, despite everything. Maybe for the first time in years. The world was mine, and for once I was free. I kept walking, the night air biting against my skin like it knew the pain I was trying to outrun. Every step felt heavier, yet lighter at the same time, as though I was shedding weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. The city felt distant, unreal, and somehow everything around me seemed less important, less vibrant than it had before. I wasn't sure if it was the darkness or the overwhelming clarity that had settled inside me, but I didn't care. I didn't care about the noise, the people, or anything that used to matter. All that mattered now was that I was free of Ashley's lies and manipulation, free from the suffocating grip she'd had on me. But the freedom wasn't without its price. The sting of betrayal still burned deep, and it seemed to chase me no matter how far I walked. I found myself shaking, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming need to scream, to release all of it at once. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, everything that had been building inside me for so long. But I didn't scream. I just kept moving. I stopped at a nearby cafe, the warm glow of the neon sign pulling me in like a moth to a flame. I was starving, but I didn't know what for. My mind was racing, but my body had its own needs now. I sat at a table in the back corner, the quiet hum of the place a stark contrast to the storm inside me. I ordered coffee, my hands trembling slightly as I wrapped them around the mug. I needed something, anything to ground me. As I stared into the dark liquid, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she had looked at me when I confronted her. So cold, so distant, as if I was nothing. It hadn't been the words, but the look in her eyes that had stung the most. The look that said I was a problem she was too tired to fix. But then there was the part of me that wondered, had I ever really mattered to her at all? Was I just a convenience to her, a placeholder in a life that had always been about what she wanted? Was I that invisible? I wanted to believe I was more than that. I wanted to believe I had been enough for her. But I couldn't, because the truth was staring me in the face now. I wasn't enough for someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. I took a sip of the coffee, feeling the bitter warmth burn my throat, but it didn't do much to quell the chaos in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel anymore. I was angry, yes, but that wasn't all. There was something deeper, something more complicated than just rage. It was regret, but not for what I had done. It was regret for all the years I had wasted, for not seeing the truth sooner, for letting someone so toxic consume me, for allowing my happiness to be held hostage by her needs. I glanced at my phone. The screen lit up with notifications. Calls from Ashley. Texts begging for a chance to talk, to fix things, to explain. Explain. The word echoed in my mind. What was there to explain? What could she possibly say now that would change anything? Another text came through. Please, I never meant to hurt you. You have to understand. I can fix this. I stared at the message, the words becoming more and more ridiculous the longer I looked at them. Fix this? How could she fix it now? How could she possibly fix the years of lies, the betrayal, the complete disregard for me as a person? It was too late for that. I slammed my phone down onto the table, the screen flashing but remaining lifeless, just like her words. It was over. It had to be. I could still feel the sting of her voice, the coldness in it. The way she spoke as if she were completely unbothered by everything I had been through. The way she had dismissed my pain with a wave of her hand. I had been nothing to her, and that, more than anything, hurt, because I had given her everything. My trust, my loyalty, my heart. But not anymore. I took another deep breath, steadying myself as I stood up from the table. I couldn't stay here forever. I couldn't hide from the world and the truth forever. I walked out of the cafe, the cool air hitting me once more. My heart pounded, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from something else. Something new. Something that had begun to take shape deep within me. Strength. I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know how I was going to face the future, or what it was even going to look like. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. I was done being the guy who always took the blame, the guy who always believed in the impossible. I was going to be the guy who looked out for himself now. The guy who knew his worth and wasn't afraid to walk away when someone didn't see it. I turned my back on the life I had shared with her, the promises she had broken, and the man I had been. Because I knew now that I had to let it all go if I was ever going to move forward. With every step I took, I felt the weight of the past slipping away, and with it, a new version of myself was beginning to take shape. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. But it was mine. And it was the only thing that mattered now. I wasn't the man I had been when I walked into that house hours ago. I wasn't the man I had been when I still believed in her lies. I was something else now. And I wasn't looking back. I was walking away from the wreckage, breathing in the air of freedom for the first time in too long. And I didn't need her to validate that freedom. I was free on my own terms now. I walked, the city's sounds swirling around me. But I was in my own bubble, a place where nothing felt quite real. The hum of traffic, the low chatter of distant conversations, even the occasional car horn. All of it felt distant, irrelevant. My footsteps echoed in the alleyways and streets, as though the ground itself was trying to remind me that I still existed, that I was still moving forward. But I didn't feel like I was moving anywhere. Not really. I felt suspended in time, caught between who I had been and who I was becoming. I passed familiar places. The diner where Ashley and I used to meet for lunch, the park bench where we once sat, hands intertwined, pretending we were untouchable. Those moments were ghosts now, and as I passed them, a strange emptiness settled in my chest. I had thought I would feel a weight lifting, but all I felt was a strange hollow space where my confidence used to be. I wanted to be angry, to scream at the top of my lungs, but the rage had dissipated, leaving only exhaustion behind. I had let myself drown in the idea that Ashley was everything I needed, everything I wanted. I had convinced myself that all the sacrifices, all the silent tolerances of her behavior, had been worth it. But now I realized that I was nothing more than a fool, a pawn in her game, an accessory to her lies. I paused at the edge of a bridge, looking down at the dark river below, the water running fast and wild, unstoppable. I leaned against the cold railing, feeling its harshness against my skin as I stared into the churning depths. There was a part of me that wanted to throw everything in. The anger, the hurt, the confusion. Just let it all go and disappear, sink into the unknown. But I couldn't. For the first time, I recognized something I hadn't been able to see earlier. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't some fragile soul caught in the storm of her deceit. I was here. I was standing on this bridge, still breathing, still thinking, still capable of choosing. Ashley had stolen so much from me. My trust, my sense of security, even my self-worth. But she hadn't taken my will to survive. She hadn't broken me, not completely. And as I stood there, a thought occurred to me. I could rebuild. I could piece together the parts of me that she had shattered, and I could be stronger than I ever was before. The person I had been, the one who tolerated her lies, was gone. But the man who had been buried beneath the weight of it all? He was still here, emerging from the wreckage. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb instinctively hovering over her number. her name flashing on the screen like a siren calling me back into the storm. It would be so easy to reach out, to answer her texts, to get sucked back into that web of manipulation. But I knew what it would cost me. I had learned the hard way what it meant to trust her. So I did the only thing that made sense. I blocked her. The confirmation flashed across my screen. The words, blocked and deleted, solidifying my decision. And in that instant, a strange sense of relief washed over me. There was no more waiting for her apology, no more hoping for her to change. I had made my choice and it felt right, felt like freedom. But as I stood there, watching the night unfold around me, I realized something else. I wasn't just running from Ashley. I was running from myself, from the man I had allowed myself to become. I was angry at her for what she had done to me, but I had also allowed it. I had accepted it. I had played the victim for so long, thinking that I had no other choice, no other way out. But now I had the power to walk away. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and began walking again. My mind was clearer than it had been in days, but the emotional wreckage was still there, lurking beneath the surface. There was still a heavy weight in my chest, a wound that hadn't fully healed. But with every step I took, it became easier to breathe. Easier to believe that tomorrow would be a new day, one where I wouldn't have to keep dragging her with me, one where I wouldn't have to keep reliving the pain of her betrayal. I wasn't alone, I realized. There were people who cared about me, people who saw me for who I was, who I still was. Friends, family, people who hadn't left me behind in the wake of Ashley's games. I had forgotten that, too. I had let her take my focus off of everything good in my life, everything worth holding on to. But now, with every passing second, I felt a connection to those people growing stronger. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, the wind biting at my skin as I found my way through the dark streets. I didn't have a destination in mind, but I knew I was on the right path now. I knew I was going to find my way back to the person I had been before Ashley, the person I had lost in the fog of lies. I passed a familiar street corner and saw the lights of a bar glowing from the other side. I paused for a moment, the urge to go inside almost overwhelming. I hadn't been out in so long. I hadn't really done anything for myself in so long. But as I looked at the door, I thought about it and shook my head. I wasn't ready for that yet. I needed more than just distractions. I needed to heal. I needed to reclaim the pieces of myself I had buried under the weight of her deceit. And I wasn't going to find that by hiding from the truth in a drink. I continued walking, my pace steady now. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. I wasn't sure how long it would take to rebuild. But I did know this. I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, take away my future. The storm inside me was far from over, but the clarity I had found, the strength I had rediscovered, was the first light in the dark. And for the first time in a long time I could feel it. That hope. The city lights blurred in the distance as I walked, but it was as if I could no longer see them, could no longer care. My thoughts were wrapped in a haze, too many emotions tangled together. Anger, fear, disbelief. Yet there was something else now, too. A deep-seated understanding, or maybe just an acceptance, settling into my bones. I wasn't sure what I was looking for anymore, or if I was even looking for anything at all. I had spent so much time trying to figure out why Ashley had done this to me, trying to understand what went wrong. But in that quiet moment by the river, standing in front of the churning water, I realized that it didn't matter. The answer wasn't something I could find in her lies or excuses. It was something I had to find in myself. I couldn't keep giving her the power to define me. I couldn't keep blaming her for the choices I had made. I had been complicit in my own way in the narrative she had created. The truth was I had stayed, even when I saw the red flags, even when I knew, deep down, that something wasn't right. I stayed. I ignored my instincts, kept hoping, kept believing that things could be different. But they never were. The realization of it hit me like a wave. I had chosen to ignore the truth, just as much as she had chosen to lie. My silence, my inaction, had allowed it to happen. And now, here I was, walking through the streets, with nothing but a broken version of myself to show for it. I stopped walking. I had no idea where I was going. But it didn't matter. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The world around me felt so loud, yet I was still trapped in the echo of what had happened. I looked at my phone again, but I didn't unlock it. I had blocked her after all. The endless stream of texts, the endless begging, it was all still waiting there, but I didn't need to see it. Instead, I opened up a new message, a message to myself. You're stronger than this. It was a reminder, a note to my future self, to remind me that I wasn't going to be the victim forever. I wasn't going to let the weight of her deceit, the sting of her betrayal, determine who I was going to become. Not anymore. I didn't need her. For the first time in what felt like forever, I deleted everything. I deleted her number, every single text, every reminder of what we had been, what I had believed we were. It wasn't going to heal the hurt, but it was a small act of control. It was something I could still do, something to remind myself that I wasn't helpless. I looked up, the weight on my chest growing, but it wasn't from the past anymore. It was from the unknown, from the future I couldn't yet see, the future that had no clear path. I had to take a step, but I didn't know which direction to go. I had to keep moving forward, but every path seemed fogged, distant, uncertain. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff. The old me, who had been so sure, so trusting, was gone, buried under the rubble of lies. The new me had yet to take shape. I didn't know who I was now or who I was becoming, and that scared me. But it also thrilled me. I had walked away from the woman I thought I loved, the woman who had been everything to me. I had walked away from the life I had spent years building. But as I walked, a tiny spark of something flickered in the back of my mind. Something new, something stronger. And maybe that was the point. Maybe it wasn't about finding the answers. Maybe it was about discovering the strength I had buried deep within me. The strength to say, I'm done. I'm moving on. I stopped at the street corner, a familiar sign blinking in front of me. A bar. The place where we had met countless times. The place where I had first fallen for her, thinking that all the pieces were falling into place. I hesitated, staring at the door. There was a time when I would have walked right in, hoping to escape the thoughts swirling in my mind, hoping to bury everything in the noise and the chaos of the crowd. But tonight, the idea felt hollow. It wasn't the distractions I needed anymore. I didn't need to drown my thoughts in alcohol or noise. I needed silence. I needed to hear myself think. I turned away from the door, the weight in my chest easing just a fraction. I didn't need this. I didn't need anything from anyone right now. I kept walking. The distance between the past and the future wasn't as far as I had once thought. Every step I took, every decision to walk away, made the divide feel just a little bit smaller. And as I moved, the knots in my stomach loosened, one by one. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but I could see it now. I could see the way forward. It wasn't going to be an easy journey. There would be days when the emptiness would come rushing back, when the anger would rise, when the weight of the loss would almost crush me. But for the first time in ages, I felt like I could handle it. I was stronger than I had ever realized. I wasn't defined by her betrayal anymore. I wasn't defined by the life I thought I was supposed to have. I was defined by my actions now, by my decision to walk away, to find my own path, and to build a future that wasn't based on lies and deceit. And so I walked on, one foot in front of the other, step by step. I didn't know exactly what awaited me, but I knew I had the power to face it. Because the world, in all its chaos and confusion, was still mine to take. And for the first time, I was ready to claim it. The streets around me were still, the occasional car passing by a reminder that life kept moving. But for me, it was as if time had stopped. It was like I was suspended in the middle of everything, watching it all unfold from a distance. A part of me wanted to scream, to release everything that had built up inside me. But another part, the quieter, darker part, knew that nothing would change if I did. There was no catharsis to be found in rage anymore. It was pointless. Ashley was gone from my life, and with that absence, I should have felt relief. I should have felt free. But there was a heaviness, an emptiness, that I hadn't expected. It was like I was waiting for something, something that would fill the space left behind. But what? I didn't know. I stopped by a convenience store, grabbed a pack of cigarettes without thinking. It was a stupid habit, something I'd sworn off years ago. But the pull was there, like an old friend that I had abandoned but was now suddenly waiting to welcome me back. I lit one, inhaling the smoke, letting it burn away the fog in my mind. But it didn't help. It didn't clear away the confusion, the weight of the betrayal, the nagging doubt that lingered behind every thought. My chest still felt tight, but it wasn't just from the cigarettes. It was the rawness of the whole situation. I'd spent years building this life, this image of who I was with Ashley. And now it was gone. Like a house of cards, everything crumbled in an instant. I tossed the half-smoked cigarette into the street and wiped my hands on my jeans. What was I supposed to do now? What was the next step in a life I hadn't even recognized until it was too late? As I walked, I noticed a park up ahead. It wasn't far, and I found myself gravitating toward it. I wasn't sure why. Maybe the quiet seemed like a place where I could think without all the noise around me. Maybe I needed something to ground me, some form of comfort that wasn't filled with judgment or expectation. I stepped inside the park, the night air carrying the scent of wet grass and the faintest trace of the city's pollution. A quietness settled over me, and I realized just how alone I was. The loneliness, which had once been suffocating, now felt like an old friend. One I didn't quite want to embrace, but one that knew me better than anyone. I sat on a bench by the old oak tree, the one I used to visit with Ashley when we talk about the future, about the life we would build together. Seems so naive now, those conversations, those dreams. Was it all a lie? Had I been living in some fantasy world? Or had she convinced me that I was the one who was wrong? I ran my hand through my hair, leaning back and staring up at the sky. It wasn't clear, but there was a certain beauty in the way the stars shone through the haze. What was the point of all this? What was the purpose of holding onto the past when it was nothing but a broken reflection of what could have been? I wasn't the man I used to be, and I wasn't sure I could go back. But part of me didn't want to go back. I wasn't sure who I was becoming, but I couldn't pretend to be the same person who had blindly loved Ashley, who had let her walk all over me, who had let her betray me without ever realizing it. I thought about all the times she had lied to me, all the times she had dismissed my concerns as paranoia, as if I were the crazy one. She had played me, twisted the truth to fit her narrative. She made me doubt my own worth, my own instincts. How had I let that happen? How had I let someone like her into my life and trusted her with everything? I couldn't answer that. I couldn't explain it. But I knew that I wasn't that person anymore. I had been broken, but I was starting to see the pieces of myself coming back together. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't neat. But it was real. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced down at the screen. It was a text from my friend, Jake. He had been one of the few who had noticed the strain in my marriage, but I hadn't wanted to admit it. I hadn't wanted to let anyone in on what was really happening. "Hey man, you good?" I stared at the message for a long moment. I could feel the weight of his question, the unspoken concern. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him I was fine, that I was moving on, that I had it all figured out. But I didn't. Not yet. I quickly typed back, "Not really, man. But I'll get there." It was a raw response, an honest one, and for once, it felt like I was telling the truth, even if the truth didn't make sense yet. I put the phone back in my pocket and leaned back, staring up at the sky again. My mind was quieter now, the chaos from earlier settling into something manageable. I wasn't sure how long I'd sit there, but I knew I didn't want to rush it. I wasn't ready to face the world outside just yet. I wasn't ready to face anyone or anything that wasn't part of this moment, part of this quiet reckoning. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know how long it would take to heal or if I ever would. But I knew something that I hadn't known before. This wasn't the end. It might feel like the end, like everything had come crashing down. But it wasn't the end. Not for me. I had a choice now. I had the power to rebuild, to move forward, to take what was broken and turn it into something else. Something better. And that was enough for tonight. I stood up from the bench, feeling the weight of the decision settle within me. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was moving forward step by step. And for the first time in ages, I believed I could make it. I took a deep breath and walked back into the night, the uncertainty no longer suffocating. It was simply the unknown, and for once that felt like freedom. I walked down the quiet streets, the night air cold against my skin. The city was still, but the noise inside my head was deafening. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but as the hours passed and I moved away from that moment at the park, something shifted. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't obvious. But there was a change, small and imperceptible. The weight of everything, Ashley's betrayal, the lies, the broken trust, hadn't vanished. I wasn't magically okay. But in that quiet, empty space, I had started to understand something deeper. It was the understanding that healing wasn't a linear path. It wasn't a quick fix or something that could happen overnight. But I could still move forward. I could still rebuild. There was no rush to have it all figured out. No pressure to have it all together. What I had was time. Time to relearn who I was. Time to reclaim the pieces of myself that had been lost in someone else's story. I was still hurt, still angry, but I could hold those emotions without letting them define me. As I rounded the corner of a familiar street, I saw the lights of my building up ahead. It was the same place where Ashley and I had started our life. And though I felt a pang of something unfamiliar in my chest, I didn't hesitate. I didn't want to run anymore. I didn't need to flee or drown myself in distractions. I stood at the door for a moment, keys in hand. The life I thought I was building, the future I had envisioned with Ashley, was shattered. But the life that was waiting for me now, it was mine, no one else's. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. I stepped inside, the silence of the apartment wrapping around me. The familiar surroundings felt alien now, as if the walls themselves were unfamiliar. But that was okay, because I wasn't the same person who had walked into that apartment months ago, thinking everything would be fine. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had learned, through the hard and painful way, that I was worthy of more than lies. I threw my keys onto the table and walked into the living room. There was an old photo of Ashley and me, smiling at a birthday dinner, and I paused before it. The memory felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. I could almost hear her voice in my head, saying something sweet, something I had once believed, but I didn't listen. Not anymore. I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay, and I wasn't going to drown myself in bitterness either. But I knew one thing for sure. I would be okay. I would move on. I glanced around the apartment, the space where all our dreams had once lived. The space that had been filled with promises that now felt empty. But I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt quiet, peaceful even. I made my way to the bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed. The weight of everything was still there, but it was lighter now. The relief I had been searching for wasn't in escaping the pain. It was in embracing it, in accepting it, and in knowing that it wasn't the end of me. I looked out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. Tomorrow I would face the world again. Tomorrow I would keep going, one foot in front of the other. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was enough, just as I was. And for the first time I smiled. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I was simply beginning again. And that, in itself, was a victory.